This day in sports history. It's July 4th, Happy Independence Day, and on this day in 1905, it was an All-American pitcher's duel between two of the all-time greatest players to ever play Major League Baseball. There's nothing more American than baseball on the 4th of July, unless that game includes Boston and Philadelphia, two cradles of American democracy and liberty. Well, on this day, it was Rube Waddell's Philadelphia Athletics versus Cy Young's Boston Americans at the Huntington Avenue Baseball Grounds in Boston. So, the game I'm talking about today was actually Game 2 of a doubleheader. Waddell had come on to pitch 2/3 of an inning to close out Game 1, which was a 5-2 win for the Athletics. Boston was able to get to him early in the second game, though, scoring a pair of runs in the bottom of the first. Philly came back to tie it up in the 6th inning when Cy Young gave up a 2-run shot to Harry Davis. After that, it was 13 innings of scoreless baseball. The Americans threatened a couple of times with men on third, but Waddell was able to get out of the inning unscathed. Now, at this point in time, the idea of a middle reliever, a closer, not really a thing. In essence, unless you were getting shelled or you were injured, you were expected to pitch the full game. By the time the game got to the 20th inning, it was estimated that both Young and Waddell had pitched close to 300 pitches apiece. Neither Waddell nor Young were junk ball pitchers either. They were two of the hardest throwers of the era. Waddell relied on his fastball with a sharp breaking curveball mixed in to retire hitters. Young was a blazer who used a combination of smoke and control to make batters look silly. In the top of the 20th, the Athletics loaded up the bases thanks to a couple of Boston fielding errors, and Waddell strode to the plate. He got just enough of a Cy Young pitch to send a slow roller towards the shortstop, Freddie Parent. Well, Parent mishandled it for another error in the inning, and a run scored. Philly added another run to make it a 4-2 game, and then Waddell came back for the bottom half, got in a little bit of a jam, allowing a base runner to get to second, but then he shut the door on Boston to preserve the 4-2 win. Waddell had pitched close to 21 innings on the afternoon, all but one scoreless. He picked up a save, even though again that stat did not exist yet, and he knocked in the winning run, even though it would take a few more years for the RBI stat to be introduced. Waddell struck out 11, and he walked 4 in the second game of the doubleheader to improve to 16-4 on the year. After the final out was recorded, Waddell celebrated by cartwheeling around the field. Now that may seem out of character for a baseball player, but it was not out of character for Waddell. As I mentioned back on the first in a story about his immaculate inning in 1902, Waddell was one of the most eccentric players to ever play the game. But at the time, he was also the game's biggest box office draw. People came out to watch this guy. Now, he was not an educated man. A minor league teammate stuck him with the nickname Rube because of his perceived lack of intelligence. He was said to be easily distracted, one time leaving a game during the middle of it when a fire truck drove past the stadium ringing its bell. He dropped everything there on the mound, followed the fire truck, and then helped extinguish the blaze. In more than one instance, he showed up just before he was scheduled to pitch, came in through the turnstile, walked down through the grandstands taking a hot dog or two out of fans' hands, consuming them while washing them down with a fan's beer, then shedding his clothes as he walked to the dugout, put on his uniform, and then he took his spot on the mound. In a few minor league games and exhibition games, he actually cleared his teammates off the field, telling them that they could go rest, he was going to strike out the side, and then he would proceed to do just that. But the man could pitch, without a doubt. The 1905 season was his best. He won the Triple Crown of pitching, leading the league with 27 wins, an ERA of 1.48, and he struck out 287. He had another incident later in the year that caused a debate back then that still rages today. Now, this story goes to what happened in September of 1905, when Waddell got into a fight with his teammate, Andy Coakley, over a remark about Coakley's straw hat, allegedly. In the melee, Waddell injured his arm badly enough to keep him out of the World Series against the New York Giants. Now, the veracity of this story is a little dubious, with many baseball historians calling into question or flat out saying it never happened. Instead, they wonder if Waddell was paid off by gamblers to actually keep him out of the World Series to give the New York Giants a better opportunity to win, which they eventually did, and without Waddell making an appearance. This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. On this day in 1939, Lou Gehrig said goodbye to Yankees fans in an emotional farewell speech. It had been 2 weeks since Gehrig had received the devastating news about his ALS diagnosis. He had been feeling bad for more than a year at this point, and it had started to show on the field early in the '39 season. When he reported to spring training that year, he was feeling weak and listless, and he just couldn't work himself into his usual form. By May 2nd, Gehrig was hitting only .143, and he removed himself from the lineup after playing 2,130 consecutive games. And that's really the thing that made Gehrig's disease even more shocking. He was the Iron Horse, baseball's Iron Man, a man who took care of his body by not drinking or smoking. In fact, he was the polar opposite of Babe Ruth. Gehrig's wife remarked once that Lou could not understand how Babe Ruth could stay out all night, drink, carouse, lose count of the number of hot dogs that he'd eaten, and then roll into the ballpark and pound long home runs like he did. Gehrig was a ball player who took care of himself, was strong in body but humble in character. And he had been given a diagnosis of a disease that would shrivel his body and take his life in less than 2 years. On this day, looking a bit weary, he was honored at Yankee Stadium with gifts and speeches given by teammates past and present. And then he stepped to the microphone, and after taking several seconds to compose himself, delivered his famous speech.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. That I might have been given a bad break, but I've got an awful lot to live for. Thank you.
It would be the last time Yankee fans would see him. His number 4 would become the first retired number in sports history. He died less than 2 years later on June 2nd, 1941. On this day in 1985, it was the most improbable home run to extend an already extended game. This event really took place in the early morning hours of the 5th, but the game started on the 4th, so I'm rolling with it. The Atlanta Braves were hosting the New York Mets at Fulton County Stadium. The Mets scored a run in the top of the 9th to tie the game at 8 to send it to extra innings. Both teams scored a pair in the 13th. New York added a run in the 18th, and with the Braves out of pinch hitters, resorted to sending pitcher Rick Camp to the plate to pinch hit with 2 outs and no one on in the bottom half of the inning. With no balls and 2 strikes, this happened.
It'll be an 0-2 pitch. And he is at the deep left. Heat goes back. It is gone. Holy cow. Oh, my goodness. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Rick Camp. Rick Camp. I don't believe it. Remember what I just said. If he hits a home run, That certifies this game as the wackiest, wildest, most improbable game in history. On an 0-2 pitch, Rick Camp hit it over the left center field wall. I don't believe it.
So let's put Camp's home run into perspective. He played 9 seasons, all with the Braves. In that span, he had 13 hits and 175 at-bats. And this was the only time he ever hit a home run. Unfortunately, this game did not have a happy Hollywood ending. Camp's homer extended the game another inning, but the Mets scored 5 in the 19th and won 16-13, with Camp also taking the loss as the pitcher of record. On this day in 2009, former Tennessee Titans and Baltimore Ravens quarterback Steve McNair was found murdered. After spending 13 seasons in the NFL, McNair retired in April 2008. The man who was third in the Heisman voting as a senior at 1AA Alcorn State in 1994, the third pick in the 1995 NFL draft by the Houston Oilers, who would move to Nashville in 97 and become the Titans, the quarterback that led his team to Super Bowl 34 in 2000 and came within a few inches of the Lombardi Trophy. The guy who won the league MVP in 2003 after leading the league in QB rating was the man that was found dead in his Nashville condo on this day in 2009. His mistress, Sahel Kazemi, was found dead with him. After 4 days of investigating the crime, Nashville police concluded it was a murder-suicide. 2 days prior to the murders, Kazemi had been ticketed for a DUI with McNair in the passenger seat. The next day, Kazemi had reportedly purchased a 9mm semi-automatic pistol from a convicted felon in the Dave & Buster's parking lot where she worked. That gun was said to be the one found at the scene under her body. Police say she shot McNair 4 times, twice in the chest, once in each temple, and then turned the gun on herself. But many family members, friends, and others doubted the conclusions of the Nashville PD. One of those is former Nashville police officer Vincent Hill, who has written 3 books about the case. There's also a podcast produced by Sports Illustrated called Fall of a Titan that came out in 2018 that explored Hill's and others' theories on this case. And if you have any interest in learning more about why there are doubts about this being a murder-suicide, check that podcast out. It doesn't come to conclusions, but it does shed a lot of doubt on what the Nashville PD came up with in just 4 days of investigation. When Steve McNair was found dead on this day, he was 36. Kazemi was 20. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. And on this day in 1910, heavyweight champ Jack Johnson stepped in the ring with James J. Jeffries. Now, this was really more about what happened before this fight and the reason behind it happening than what actually happened in the ring on this day. If you've been a longtime listener of this dish, you might remember the December 26th edition when I talked about Jack Johnson becoming the first black fighter to win the heavyweight title, beating Tommy Burns in Sydney, Australia. Well, a furor arose after that fight for a white challenger to come forth to beat Jack Johnson. The fight on this day, 18 months later, is the first of the Great White Hope fights. James J. Jeffries was a retired fighter, maybe not officially, but he had not fought professionally since 1904, 6 years earlier, and he had gotten a little doughy as an alfalfa farmer in California. The writer Jack London had witnessed the Johnson-Burns fight on Boxing Day, 1908, and after watching Johnson pummel Burns and taunt the crowd, London put out a public call to Jeffries to get off his couch and out of his produce patch and get back in the ring to, as he put it, put the Black Othello back in his place. In fact, it was Jack London who coined the term Great White Hope to encourage Jeffries to get back into the ring. But Jeffries really wasn't interested, at least in the beginning. He had finished as an undefeated fighter, and he was content to leave it like that. But as Johnson continued showing up and beating up white farmhands in boxing matches across the West, Southwest, and the East, Jeffries finally decided to answer the call and get back in the ring. A fierce battle of promoters ensued, and it was Tex Rickard who came away with it, setting it up in Reno, Nevada on July 4th, and he labeled it the Fight of the Century. The folks of Reno built a 20,000-seat outdoor venue specifically for the fight, and by the time it rolled around, they'd sold 15,760 of those tickets. The crowd was mostly Caucasian, with the chant, "Jeff, it's up to you," resonating throughout the pre-fight atmosphere. When Johnson stepped into the ring, he was a 3-1 underdog, mostly because the white crowd did not want to bet on the black man to win. But Johnson brimmed with confidence. Jeffries climbed between the ropes looking tired and haggard. Ringside hopes faded soon after. The fight was initially scheduled for 45 rounds. They would not need nearly that many. Jeffries' punches never found their mark, parried by Johnson for most of the fight. Johnson had little problem punching past Jeffries' defenses. By the 14th round, a still fresh Johnson was pounding his frustrated counterpart with jabs and taunts. In the 15th, Johnson put Jeffries on the mat for the first time in his career. Jeffries would rise twice more to take more punishment, and twice more would be sent back to the canvas. The white spectators ringside pleaded with the referee to stop the fight and not let Johnson knock him out. They still wanted to salvage a little bit of dignity. After the third knockdown, Jeffries' lights dimmed and the fight was over. The White Crusade, at least the first one, had failed. And it seems only fitting to polish off this episode with what happened on this day back in 2003, when former Chicago Bear William the Fridge Perry competed in the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest at Coney Island. By looking at the man, you know he can eat. He just can't eat really fast, apparently. The Fridge only managed to house 4 dogs and dropped out after 5 minutes. It was Kobayashi winning that year with 44.5 dogs in what was then a 12-minute contest. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Calvin Coolidge's vice president, Charles Dawes, wrote a little instrumental song that eventually topped the Billboard charts as a #1 single. In 1911, 14 years before entering the White House as VP, Dawes wrote a song he titled Melody in A Major. It wasn't until 1951 that lyrics got put to that song by Carl Sigman, who called it It's All in the Game. In 1958, Tommy Edwards did a doo-wop version of the song, and it soared to #1 on the charts, with Edwards becoming the first black man to chart a #1 song. Nat King Cole, Elton John, Van Morrison, Isaac Hayes, and Merle Haggard have all recorded a version of that song as well. Dawes is still the only chief executive to write a chart-topping song, and I'm guessing it will stay that way for a long time. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
The Sports History Network, where legends live on and the past plays loud. Welcome to the place where history's proud. From gridiron glory to the hardwood stars, from the racetrack heat to Olympic bars. It's the voices, the stories, the moments you miss, told by fans and pros who live for this. Hook and Thimic, the Sports History Network, where the past comes alive. Podcasts and blogs that keep the flame high. From Babe to Brady, Alley to the Dome. If it's history and sports, then this is the home. SportsHistoryNetwork.com, the headquarters of sports yesteryear.